Everything begins in a dungeon where a monster that looks like a rabbit attacks a boy, but ends up being easily defeated by his sword. Two other rabbits attack as well, but they're also taken down without difficulty. After making these movements, the human realizes that maybe he isn't as out of shape as he thought, and that he can still manage as a swordsman. When 5 goblins appear before him, the boy sees that it's time to test his support spells, so he casts Strength Increase, an ability capable of buffing his physical attributes or strengthening his equipment. According to the man, every adventuring group needs at least one member capable of using this type of technique, because it's very important to have someone who can raise the attack and defense of the whole team. By the way, by using this magic, he manages to defeat all the enemies one by one without taking any damage. However, even though he praises the qualities of this kind of enchantment, he admits that it has one central weakness: time. After 3 minutes of fighting, the enchantment ends, and when more goblins start appearing in the dungeon, he has to repeat the same ability to stay ahead in the battle. While he destroys his new opponents, the human thinks about how an individual's resistance to magic affects the duration of their enchantment. In his case, it's only 3 minutes, and sadly that forces him to constantly watch the time so he can reactivate the spell whenever it ends, making enchanters like him always fight an endless battle against the clock. The boy is able to handle a sword, which isn't common for someone of his class, but this limitation is still a weakness. And speaking of weaknesses, that's exactly why the young man was kicked out of his adventuring group without ceremony by its leader, Oliver. Remembering that day with anger, the enchanter argued that the two of them were childhood friends who had always fought together. But Oliver confessed that during all that time, he only gave Orhan a few chances because they came from the same village, and that from now on, they would go their separate ways. Annalie and Derek, the other 2 members of the team, were more direct in making it clear that Orhan was only slowing everyone down, so Oliver threw in the towel and admitted that he was expelling his childhood friend because he wasn't strong enough. Unable to believe what he was hearing, Orhan remembered how he formed that team with Oliver 8 years ago, and how they reached S rank in a short time, becoming the first group to reach the 94th floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth, so much so that, because of that feat, they started being called the Heroes Party. With that memory in mind, Orhan acknowledged that maybe he wasn't strong enough. But if he wasn't, then no one in the group was. Oliver interrupted his friend to emphasize that they hadn't really understood the importance of an enchanter to the team until that joint attack last month, when they saw how incredible the enchanters from the other S-rank groups were, while Orhan was weak. Orhan admitted he wasn't that good because his real profession was swordsman. But even then, he developed his own original magic, not wanting to hear excuses. Derek and Annalie cut him off aggressively and reminded him that he only changed professions because he was worse than Oliver with a sword. But even in his new class, he didn't stand out. In response, Orhan argued that he only became an enchanter because the group needed one, and because he was the one with the most aptitude for it, pushing himself to the point of developing his own magic to compensate for his weaknesses, ensuring the group survived the deeper floors of the dungeons because of that. Once again, the boy was interrupted, this time by Oliver, who made it clear that they already had a replacement enchanter. This news shook the expelled member deeply, while Annalie commented without the slightest remorse that they were the heroes' party and couldn't be slowed down by someone who couldn't keep up with the rest of the group. Understanding once and for all that there was no place for him anymore, even though he couldn't believe he had been thrown away like that after everything they had been through together, Orhan headed toward the exit, heartbroken. The mage also pointed out that he was able to use some magic and a sword, but everything at a rank, and even so he kept trying to tell everyone what to do, which was quite irritating. According to the girl, people like Orhan are called Jack of all trades, a way to belittle those who only serve to fill in gaps and aren't that important. Filled with hatred over the way he was expelled from his team, Orhan can't swallow being called something like that, a Jack of all trades. Even so, he didn't leave the group empty-handed, since through his own effort, he figured out a way to combine his 2 professions, swordsman and enchanter, becoming an adaptable enough adventurer to make this fusion work effectively. With this technique he acquired, Orhan hopes never again to be called a jack of all trades, and that one day he'll be an adventurer capable of doing anything. After finishing his expedition in the dungeon, the boy registers the teleport crystal so he can return directly to the 7th floor next time. However, when he's about to leave, he runs into a group of adventurers who had to flee from a horde of orcs and were forced to leave a little girl behind. Because if they had stayed, the leader explains, everyone would have been killed. and he decided to prioritize his older companions. Orhan can't help but worry when he hears that, but he tries not to get involved in the problem, convincing himself that the girl was just unlucky to have joined the wrong group. However, he knows very well the pain of being abandoned by your team, and knowing that makes Orhan turn back and decide to intervene. Taken by indignation, he accuses the group of abandoning a teammate and then making excuses so they wouldn't have to save her, the kind of people who irritate the enchanter the most. One of the members responds that he wouldn't have been able to save the girl even if he had stayed behind. And since he's not the type to swallow an insult, he tries to punch Orhan, who easily counters and throws the kid to the ground. Quickly, Orhan asks where the girl was left. Speaking of her, the poor young girl was surrounded by orcs and on the verge of being devoured alive. In a desperate move, she plays her last card by invoking a magical shield to keep the monsters from getting closer, while they tried to break through the barrier, and she screamed for her older sister. Suddenly, just as the defense shatters, Orhan arrives, unleashing an arrow shock and driving the enemies back. They immediately start attacking the man instead. As always, Orhan prepares his sword and buffs himself with strength, boost his main battle combination, then engages the orcs in close combat. He also activates technique boost to face opponents of that caliber, which makes the girl confused about this man's profession, since he seems to be both an enchanter and a swordsman at the same time. After defeating some of the orcs, the human casts sharpness boost to make his blade even more capable of tearing through the enemy's flesh. When he returns to the fight, the girl is impressed, having never seen anyone fight like that. Facing this horde, Orhan understands why that low-ranked group ended up running away. But he, on the other hand, knows he can handle this on his own. With that in mind, the swordsman heads into the center of the chaos and performs a series of strikes that shred a large portion of the monsters. Then, he displays technique and speed as he beheads his opponents with extraordinary ease, leaving the little girl more and more astonished by the extent of his talent. Soon enough, when the enchanter finishes off all the orcs, the girl collapses onto the ground in relief and starts crying. After getting the girl safely out of the dungeon, Orhan was simply saying goodbye, not expecting much, but eager to thank him properly for the help he gave. The girl says she is eternally grateful and introduces herself as Sophia Claudel. Hearing her last name, the swordsman finally notices the crest on her tunic, then introduces himself in return as Orhan Dura, a name Sophia really liked. Wanting to make up for the trouble she caused, the girl offers to pay for the boy's dinner. And although he says he didn't help her expecting anything in return, she is so intent on rewarding him somehow that he ends up accepting the invitation, even if a bit awkwardly. So she takes the enchanter to a restaurant whose sign carries the same crest as her clothing. According to the girl, it's a very cheap place, but the food is great. This confirms for Orhan that Sophia Claudel is indeed part of the Silver Rabbits of the Night Sky, one of the biggest and most popular clans in the kingdom of Nohitn. Once inside, Sophia is startled to see her older sister in the establishment, and she explains that she's there for a meeting nearby. She asks who the boy with her sister is, saying Sophia is far too young to be dating. Embarrassed, Sophia panics and can't explain what's going on, until her older sister finally realizes she is standing before Orhan Dura. Scratching his head, Orhan says, "Long time no see, Selma Claudel." Sophia doesn't understand how this guy knows her sister, so he explains that Selma is the leader of the Silver Rabbit's most powerful S-rank, simply the strongest enchanter in the kingdom, largely responsible for making the enchanter profession well known, as well as creating the idea of group members having different roles. In the strategy she created, each team is divided into 3 functions: attackers, who take down the enemy; defenders, who act as shields; and supporters, who provide assistance. This strategy revolutionized the way adventurers carry out their missions, forever changing dungeon expeditions. According to Orhan, the hero's party is no different, and that's why he had to abandon his swordsman profession to become an enchanter. After seeing how strong Selma was in last month's joint assault, that's when his teammates decided Orhan wasn't good enough, which eventually resulted in his expulsion. Thinking to himself, he had already suspected the 2 girls were from the same clan, but had no idea they were sisters. Speaking of that, wearing an angry expression, Selma asks what this brat is doing around her 14-year-old little sister. Not knowing how to explain it properly, Orhan says he really was going to have dinner with Sophia, but that his intentions are pure, interpreting that as him saying her sister isn't good enough for him. Selma loses her temper and starts to raise her voice, so Sophia steps in to calm her down and explains that this man was the one who saved her life. Disappointed that Sophia went into the dungeon alone and without informing the clan, Selma reminds her that the day after tomorrow they were supposed to go together to the Great Labyrinth, and that the younger girl should never have done that. Since she's unharmed, the older sister isn't going to scold her, but insists she never repeat that behavior. Because Orhan saved her sister, Selma thanks him and apologizes for her harshness. Then the three sit together more calmly, and Selma mentions she hasn't seen Orhan since that joint assault last month when they met, and that this is the first time the two have talked like this. Since they're in the same class, they were placed together in that battle, where Selma took command and Orhan served as support. Selma praises the boy's performance that day, and Sophia comments that it sounds like her sister has known this guy for a long time. Selma is surprised that the younger girl had never heard of Orhan Dura, since he is a member of the Heroes Party. The girl is shocked to learn how important he is, but Orhan says he no longer belongs to that team, without revealing the exact reason. Hearing that, Selma asks if he is free, thinking she is about to recruit him for the Silver Rabbits. Orhan doesn't even let the girl finish and declines the invitation immediately, because he wants to stay without a group for a while. Selma explains that the young man misunderstood the situation. In reality, she has the perfect job for the swordsman, accompanying her clan on the training expedition that will begin the day after tomorrow. This expedition is meant to recruit new members, where A rank and S rank veterans will lead these new recruits for 3 days as they descend to the 50th floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. Impressed that this would take only 3 days, Orhan comments that the best novice adventurers would take 6 months to a year to do the same. Selma then explains that it's possible if they take the shortest route. She also admits that the expedition sponsors are demanding quick results. Orhan points out that even the Silver Rabbits have their own problems, but he still doesn't understand why the sponsors are pressuring the clan so much, even after such a bold promise regarding the expedition. Either way, since she's determined to move forward with this mission, the swordsman thinks that if the goal is to strengthen the clan as a whole, then the novices who wouldn't be able to defeat the floor boss could explore the deeper levels on their own. Selma is impressed that he figured that out based solely on the little she said, which means he's sharper than she thought. In labyrinths, adventurers must defeat the bosses that appear every 10 floors in order to keep descending, and it's very common for recruits to die in fights of that level. But if the more experienced adventurers handle those battles, the novices can simply register at the crystal and proceed to the next floor. In fact, that's why the leader wants Orhan Dura to join this expedition. He asks if it's really okay for someone from the outside to be part of it. At that moment, the woman holds his hands, making him flustered, and emphasizes how much she respects him as an enchanter. The boy is glad to hear that, but it also reminds him of the reason he was expelled from the Heroes Party, not being as strong as Selma during their combined attack. And now she's asking him to return to being an enchanter, which doesn't sound very appealing considering the recent trauma he went through. Because of that, Dura ends up refusing the invitation. But Sophia says she's going as well and insists that he join them, shaking him a little. He promises to think about it more, but emphasizes that he abandoned the enchanter profession to focus on being a swordsman, and if he's going to take part in this mission, it will be in that role. Even though she's surprised, Selma accepts his condition, because deep down she believes that if things get heated inside the labyrinth, Orhan Dura will return to being an enchanter to deal with the situation. Either way, if he decides to participate, he must go to the Silver Rabbits headquarters tomorrow morning. At nightfall, Orhan goes to the shop of an old man who, despite being close to closing, welcomes the boy warmly and offers him tea. After all, he feels enormous gratitude for all the promotion the boy gave the shop when he became a member of the Heroes Party, which boosted sales. Speaking of that, the boy apologizes to his grandfather before revealing that he's no longer part of the group. Even so, the elderly man says his gratitude for his grandson will never diminish, and that Orhan is still himself with or without that team. He knows very well how hard the boy worked to help, and that will never be forgotten. In the old man's opinion, people like his grandson are essential for society, and seeing how the boy struggles to accept compliments, he urges Orhan to receive such words of affection better whenever he hears them. Trusting his grandson's intuition and character, the grandfather asks him to do what he believes is right, because his journey is long and only just beginning. Therefore, Orhan should live for himself, but never stop helping others. Whatever happens, his grandfather will always be by his side. The next morning, Orhan Dura reports to the Silver Rabbits HQ. Seeing that he looks well, Selma asks if he feels relieved to have left the Heroes Party, and he answers that it's something like that. Next, Vince Brawers, the clan leader, thanks the young man for coming and admits he has heard quite a lot about him, including the unfortunate part about him leaving the hero's party. As for Orhan, he doesn't go into that subject and instead wants to know more about this teaching expedition. Selma then reminds him that in 3 days they'll be heading to the 51st floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. Before reaching that level, they'll stop on the 21st floor on the first day, the 36th on the second day, and so on. In the middle of that explanation, we see an earlier moment when Selma told the leader of the rabbits about Orhan Dura's departure from the hero's party, and how she saw it as a terrible loss for the team, since they certainly wouldn't be as strong without Dura. Selma agreed, because the enchanter raised the team to another level with his support magic. Sure, Orhan's spells were less potent than average, but his enchantment speed was impressive 4 times faster than hers. On top of that, Selma had seen Orhan use original spells, and she noticed that he had great ability to analyze situations, predict the next move, and provide magical support at the right moment. He had every skill an enchanter needs. With his absence in the hero's party, Selma believed the Silver Rabbits would return to the top very soon. Hearing about that boy during the joint attack, Vince found it hard to believe that Orhan Dura had been discarded like that. But his subordinate explained that enchanters usually don't get the credit they deserve. She herself, because she's famous, ends up being overrated, while the truly powerful ones, like Orhan, are usually treated as if they're nothing. Returning to the present moment, after hearing all the details of the expedition, Orhan goes over the plan. There will be 10 groups of rookies and 5 escorts, including him and Selma. The rookies groups will take turns dealing with the monsters, and if something unusual happens, the escorts are the ones who must handle it. By the way, Orhan asks why only 5 escorts instead of more rank groups, since it would make sense to minimize the risks of the expedition, especially given how tight the schedule is and how it could put the beginners in danger. Selma answers that they really do want to take the rookies to the 51st floor, but that they need to go through some difficulty in order to truly grow during this mission. Orhan knows that isn't the real reason, though he has no idea what the real one is, and of course they wouldn't tell an outsider like him. Regardless, he offers his help and receives Vince Brawers' thanks. According to him, the enchanter's reward will be 2 gold coins now, and 10 more if the mission succeeds. Orhan thinks that's great, although he admits he found the payment excessive, since it's enough to cover a full year of expenses for an ordinary citizen. Selma points out that this is the value they see in him, so he promises to do his best. Hours later, Orhan Dura heads to the dungeon entrance where the excursion will take place, and the rookies are gathered, preparing for the start of the journey. When Selma and Sophia appear and greet him, he notices that the little girl's outfit is the same as before, probably the standard uniform for beginners. He also says she looks great in that outfit, making Sophia blush as she thanks him. While Selma can't handle the face her sister makes and sarcastically points out how well Orhan knows how to compliment a lady. Since they're already talking about knowing how to charm someone, Selma asks if the guy has a girlfriend. He scratches his head and says no. But since there were women on his old team, he probably learned how to deal with the opposite sex. Selma remembers that the hero's party used to live together in the same mansion, while Sophia asks where her friend is living now. He explains that he's living at an inn. Selma panics, trying to understand why her sister would want to know that, since it sounds like she might be planning to visit him. And the poor girl has to scramble to explain that she was just curious, changing the subject. Selma asks why Orhan is staying farther away from the rookies, and he explains that since he's an outsider, he chose to give them some distance to make the beginners even more anxious. Speaking of that, the enchanter asks him to help calm the group down, while she asks Sophia to go meet her team. Soon after, Orhan accompanies Selma as she approaches a trio of adventurers who will serve as escorts. The Silver Rabbit praises Orhan Dura and assures them he will be a great companion, and everyone believes it when such an important member of the group says that. Orhan, on the other hand, asks her not to put such high expectations on him, especially in front of the others. Finally, after Orhan says he's an attacker, the blue-haired man introduces himself as Anthem, a defender. Bernard, the other guy, is also a defender, while Kathy is the healer. Orhan thinks the group is well balanced, but if he hadn't come, someone would have had to make do as the attacker, and that makes the boy even more suspicious about this plan. Seeing the boy's reactions, Selma once again remembers that conversation she had with her leader. Vince said he understood how she felt for having lost such a powerful trump card, but reminded her that Orhan is an enchanter just like her. and thinking about the group's balance, he couldn't remain in the first squad. Even though she agreed, Selma lamented that her clan hadn't moved forward even a single step since last year, making her believe the Silver Rabbits wouldn't be able to regain what they had lost, and it was exactly for that reason that she invited Orhan Dura to participate in the expedition. Still, he only agreed to come if he were used as a swordsman, and all she hopes is that he truly works as a frontline attacker when things start getting intense. Finally, after saying goodbye to the escort group, Selma takes Orhan to the rookies to welcome them. Moving to the front and receiving everyone's full attention, the leader announces that today they will begin their descent toward the 51st floor of the Great Southern Labyrinth. She understands the young one's nervousness, since it's not easy to reach such a deep level of this dungeon so early in their careers, but she asks them not to worry, as she brought a powerful companion in case something outside the plan happens. In that case, she introduces Orhan Dura and reveals that he has already descended to the 94th floor, a place even central figures of the kingdom haven't reached, including Selma herself. The newcomers are impressed, and a murmur quickly spreads through the crowd about the man's incredible achievement. As if that weren't enough, even though Orhan asks Selma not to put so much pressure on him, she not only says he will be the main reference for everyone inside the dungeon, but also highlights the fact that he was once part of the hero's party, which immediately turns him into a kind of celebrity among the trainees. After the speech, Dura complains that the girl put him on a god-level pedestal of expectations, but she insists it was the best thing to do, since it's important work to help keep the rookies calm. The issue is that, in Orhan's mind, he only wants the title of hero if it's to help his grandfather in the shop, and he hopes this nonsense doesn't give him a headache. Anyway, Selma asks the boy to accompany Team 10, formed by the most promising newcomers, who, if they learn to work together, will easily reach the mid-floors. Selma holds her companion's hand to give him confidence, but he doesn't know if she should trust someone from outside that much. Be that as it may, Orhan Dur goes to the trio of newcomers that form Team 10, where Sophia is included. Orhan thought someone was missing, but upon learning that all the members of his team were indeed there, he starts thinking about how dangerous it is to form a team with so few rookies. The boy in the trio explains, full of charm, that no one can keep up with their pace, and Orhan worries about how this kid will turn out when he grows up if he's already this full of attitude at his age. He then asks his subordinates to introduce themselves. The boy says his name is Logan Hayward, the enchanter who will one day surpass Selma. Next, Caroline Inglot introduces herself as a defender. The escort notices that the girl has little equipment for the class she belongs to, but she explains that she is a defender who doesn't use armor or a shield, because she prefers dodging instead of blocking, since she can't even think about disgusting monsters touching her. But because she has a huge desire to kill all of them, she chose the class that allows her to get as close as possible to those enemies. Orhan points out that dodging attacks is much more difficult than protecting yourself with a shield, especially for someone without experience like Caroline, so he asks whether anyone in the clan opposed the girl's choice. Logan says yes, but that their companion simply ignored everyone and went ahead with her decision. This comment sparks an argument between the two, and to put an end to the foolishness, Dura asks the last member of the trio to introduce herself. So, Sophia Claudel says her name to everyone and identifies herself as a rear-line attack mage. When Sophia finishes speaking, Logan and Caroline start arguing again, and Orhan realizes this mission won't be easy at all. However, to his surprise, the kids go quiet as soon as they enter the labyrinth. Caroline asks what a member of the hero's party is doing on this expedition, since she thought their clans were rivals. As Selma had already said, Orhan reminds her that he is no longer part of that group, since it is a highly prestigious team. The girl insists on knowing why he left, but he refuses to answer in any way. Changing the subject, Caroline assumes that Sophia must already know the escort, because she said they would be accompanied by someone incredible. Caroline demands an answer from her colleague to know whether this is the incredible guy she mentioned. And when cornered, Sophia turns as red as her hair, but reveals that Orhan Dur saved her life, besides being very strong and having been part of the hero's party. She also says her sister told her she didn't need to worry because Dura would be there, not seeing himself as a hero at any moment. Even if the girl sees him that way, the enchanter wonders whether Selma only praised him like that to calm the sister down. Suddenly, two wolves that had been silently observing decide to leap at the adventurers, but they fall into a magical trap placed by Orhan along the path, which gives him certainty that he did the right thing preparing these devices along their route. especially to deal with enemies that attack from behind without spending too much time. After all, time is something they don't have much of, and if they're going to waste any, it should be on harder fights. Some time later, when Team 10 reaches the 20th floor, Orhan has watched his rookies fight enough to understand he won't have problems for the rest of the training expedition. Honestly, he thought Logan was just a cocky kid, but he really is a skilled enchanter. If he manages to perform well in longer battles, he will certainly be very useful in a ranked group in the future. However, even though he is a genius, he is terrible at giving orders, which is essential for his class, although he can develop this skill over time, of course. Caroline is indeed extremely fast, as a dodge-type defender requires, but she has two problems. The first is that she attacks impulsively and without thinking, and although she really does need to be the group's front line, the way she exposes herself is concerning. Second, Caroline uses only 2 daggers as her weapon, which certainly matches her style, but does not provide enough firepower for the group. Lastly, Sophia is not as impressive as the other two, but she is already stronger than a common rookie. She was a bit passive during the fights and failed by hesitating at certain moments, but that will change once she connects better with her teammates. Also, Sophia doesn't have any very notable weaknesses, which creates expectations regarding her future development. Meanwhile, with help from the 3 escorts, Selma's group defeats the boss of the 20th floor, then asks the newcomers to register the floor on their guild cards so the expedition can end for the day. With some free time, the Enchantress goes to Orhan to hear what he thought of the first day. He agrees that Team 10 has a lot of potential, but he regrets that they're not working very well together. He even admits he's especially worried about Caroline, although Selma insists the girl has improved a lot recently. That makes the boy wonder what she must have been like in the past if she still behaves this way today. The next day, Orhan Dura is shocked when he reads a front-page story in the newspaper about the new enchanter of the hero's party, which makes it public that Orhan was expelled from the team. Upset by the humiliation, he crushes the newspaper in his hands. He also fears that some rookie may have read the article and started seeing him differently, which is exactly what he doesn't want. When he leaves the inn and heads toward the meeting point, Dura is approached by a girl named Luna, whom he hasn't seen in a long time. Back in the hero's party, even when Orhan was treated worse and worse, Luna was the one who kept treating him kindly, just like always. And when he was expelled, she wasn't there. She had been away doing something for her family, and if she had been there, things probably would have turned out differently. Faced with yet another complicated issue involving his former team, Dura realizes how much this subject has really been consuming his mind. Luna practically begs her friend to come back to the party, but when he asks whether the others feel the same, she admits that she's the only one asking for the enchanter's return. Still, if Orhan decides to come back, she'll do everything she can to convince the others. Even though he's caught off guard, Orhan can see in Luna's eyes that she's serious, but he declares that it's already too late for that, especially after the article he just read. Hearing this, Luna takes his hand and reminds him that they promised to finish the Great Labyrinth together. But Orhan hardens his expression, pulls his hand away, and says that this was a promise the two of them made together with Oliver, and Oliver was the one who expelled him from the team, so that promise will never be fulfilled. With that, Orhan walks away, irritated, admitting to himself that he wanted the 3 of them to stay together forever, that he truly wanted them to fulfill what they promised. But there's no use crying over spilled milk. Orhan Dura no longer has anywhere to go back to. Check out these videos appearing on your screen and subscribe so you don't miss the next part.